So here we are. We're actually, this is me and there's Sarah Ann, my wife. We're at a place on the south coast of Cyprus, not quite as far along as Paphos, but it's actually a temple area which had a palace as well, linked to the harbour, which was the main base for the cult of Aphrodite. So spectacular ruins, really beautiful places, and like I say, you know, you're encouraged to look around and climb over them. You can see all the rubble. There's bits of pottery just lying around everywhere, and here we are. Here we are at Paphos, in the Tomb of the Kings, which is technically, that's the name, but it's technically not for kings. It's technically sort of the elite, the noblemen of Paphos. This was used from the Hellenistic period to the sort of Ptolemaic period, so sort of early Roman, for about 200 to 300 years. So this is the place where Paphos would have been when Paul arrived, as opposed to where the modern city is, which is set a little bit further back. So fantastic archaeology. You can go down, get into all the tombs, have a look around. Spectacular archaeology and building carved right out into the side of the cliff that you can kind of go and crawl around and have a look in. Incredible pottery and archaeology. I mean, we spent the whole day just wandering around the Cyprus Museum, and there was pottery after artifact. Many of the things that I recognize, some of the things like this particular pot, we actually have an almost exact identical copy of this, so a genuine piece, in our Creation Research Centre. So you can come and see these kind of artifacts even in the UK in our Creation Research Centre. So really quite exciting. This is also at Paphos, up on the top of the hill. This is at the Cult of Aphrodite place up in the palace. This is part of the Acropolis, so the fortification near the temple. And you can see this huge, I mean, it's just absolutely, you couldn't get up close to it, unfortunately. It's one of the only things that actually had a barrier around it, but it's just absolutely enormous. I mean, that is probably about 8 foot tall, that sort of altar incense offering burner thing, right? It reminded me of when the scripture talks about the big bowl that was built outside of the temple, outside of Solomon's temple. But you can also see the sort of pagan elements of it. You've got the cow, and of course, this is the kind of thing that plagued the children of Israel. They worshipped calves and baby cows, famously, of course, with Moses, but also when they're fallen to Baal and stuff like that, there's the depictions of the cow as well. Great big pillars everywhere you go, absolutely beautiful, stunning archaeology that you can just go and explore. I mean, it really is like, you know, archaeologist's paradise. If you're interested in this stuff, I highly recommend it. The weather, by the way, is absolutely beautiful as well. We've only had a couple of rain and bits of rain, and it's mostly been in the evening. For the most part, the weather has been, I mean, we are middle of November, right? It's cold and wet and miserable back at home, and here it's sort of 25 degrees Celsius and just absolutely gorgeous, even able to go swimming and stuff. But this is another interesting element. If you head over towards the capital is actually split in two. So there's a long political history, which is slightly complicated, but basically a small number of Cypriots, when they basically gained independence from Britain, they established, Britain helped them establish their own government. A small number of Cypriots had allegiance to Turkey, and as a result, Turkey invaded and basically claimed part of Cyprus for their own, and Turkey now claims that North Cyprus is an independent state. Nobody else, no other country on the planet recognizes it as an independent state. It's all recognized as Cyprus under Turkish, or North Cyprus under Turkish occupation. But what's interesting is that they've actually developed their own flag, which is essentially a reverse, it's identical but a flipped color scheme of the Turkish flag. So the Turkish flag is obviously red with the white stripes and the white crescent moon and star. So this is basically a flip of that. And as you're driving along towards the city, which you can see beneath there, up in the mountains, there's no mistaking which part of the country you're sort of heading towards, because you have this enormous Turkish flag essentially etched into the side of the mountains. I mean, it is just phenomenally huge. It's actually seen from space. There's sort of a no man's land in between. The city is kind of split in two. All the touristy stuff, of course, is in the Cypriot part. That's what it looks like from the satellite image. So you can see you've got the sickle moon or the crescent moon, and you've got the star. Now, what's interesting is if you go onto the North Cyprus website, the official North Cyprus website, where of course they talk about their history and being heroically liberated by the Turkish government, they talk about why they use this flag, which of course has connections with the Turkey. But they actually say that even though these symbols are now associated with Islam, their symbols and their meanings go back a lot further than that. And that's basically all they say. And it really is true. And you don't have to go very far to find evidence of that, because just in the Cyprus Museum, which is in the Cypriot part of the capital city, you see figurines like this. You see him with a funny pointed hat on. These are actually depictions of Baal, the god Baal. So Baal had a few different representations. This is him in his human form. He also came in a cow form with horns, and you can see influence of that in the Hindus and their cows being sacred because he was influenced there. But also he had his symbol, the thing which represented him, and it was the crescent moon, right? It was the sickle moon. So you see this, he stole that, or the spirit of it, if you like, stole that from the old Mesopotamian god Sin, whose representation was also that of the crescent moon. So you've got this pagan influence all the way through. And you don't have to go very far to find the pagan influence for the star either. Here we are just yesterday, up high in the coast there, and you can see behind us Aphrodite's rock. So this is the place where Aphrodite supposedly was born. The idea is that if you swim around the rock all the way once, you'll become more beautiful or something like that. But I won't show you a picture of Aphrodite because she's usually depicted obviously naked or semi-naked. But the whole basis of it is that she was actually taken as an influence from the old Babylonian god Ishtar or Sharte. And you'll find that they have this epicenter of paganism which started with the Babylonians. It's spread out, obviously that can be traced back to the Tower of Babel. It spread out to the Greeks with Aphrodite. It spread out into the Anglo-Saxons through the Etruscans, and it ended up becoming the Anglo-Saxon goddess, which is where the inspiration for the name Easter came from. So you find there's connections not just in the names and also the linguistics, but also the images, the idea of being for love or fertility or for sexual immorality, but also the symbol of the star is associated all the way through. So you've got some interesting sort of pagan connections that you can kind of start to trace through and think about a little bit deeper. And there it is there, as they said, associated with Islam, but it's not just the sickle moon and the star that's associated with Islam. If you look at the pronunciation of Baal, we of course B-A-A-L, right? That's the English, we call him Baal. But if you look up the original pronunciation, it's pronounced Bala, which sounds a lot like Allah. So again, interesting connections there as well. What I'm going to do now, finish the PowerPoint there. We've had a great time here so far. I've got a few more films that I'd like to bring and a few more clips and stuff. We'll see what we can do with them. But what I'll do now is I'll just see if I can play a little video. It's about 7 minutes long, but it talks about Paphos, a bit about what we've been talking about, and an interesting thought that we had when comparing the response that Paul got here in Cyprus to what he got in Greece on Mars Hill. So I'll play that now, and then I think we'll have a bit of a break and ask some questions. But let's put this up and see if it works. G'day folks, Indiana Joe here on location in Cyprus. Yeah, we're here in Cyprus, courtesy of British Airways, who way back in, do you remember all the COVID 2020 stuff, right? There was a bit of confusion over reimbursements and stuff like that, and we ended up with free flights, so we took them. We're at Cyprus, having a bit of a break, but also looking at some of the absolutely fantastic archaeological sites. And there are biblical references as well. Yes, right now, where we currently are, is Paphos, mentioned in scripture. The Apostle Paul went there, right? Specifically, we're in an archaeological park in Paphos, and the modern day city is actually about 2 miles in that direction. We're in the old part, which would have been the part that it
what it looked like when the Apostle Paul came here. So it's amazing to get, up close and see what it actually looked like and felt like. Now, specifically, we're in the Tomb of the Kings. More accurately, it's a tomb area for the noblemen of Cyprus and the rich people. It was used predominantly during the end of the Hellenistic period and into the Ptolemaic period, so sort of beginning of the Roman Empire. So it would have certainly been in use and been looking pretty good at the time that Paul came here. He didn't sail here, however. You see, the Apostle Paul landed in Salamis, which is over on the east side of the island, currently, which is the area occupied by Turkey. He then walked about 90 miles with Barnabas and with Mark and ended up here in Paphos and sought out the consul, the guy in charge, right? Because this was the capital at the time. And of course, you can read about it in Acts chapter 13. It's a pretty cool read. He had a run-in with a guy called Bar Jesus or Bar Yeshua, who was some kind of demon worshipper, witchcraft side of stuff, ended up performing a miracle, blinding the guy permanently, and off he went. And it has a rather interesting little connection because it says that the consul then believed. When he saw the evidence, he believed, and many people accepted with him. Now, a little bit of historical context can be very, very useful when understanding what was going on here. Because, well, Cyprus was the birthplace of Aphrodite, the Greek goddess of love, and she was worshipped here. In fact, just around the corner we visited earlier, you had Aphrodite's rock, where she supposedly came naked out of the sea, riding on a shell. And you had a cult. The cult of Aphrodite was based here. It was a deeply religious place, and she was worshipped as the goddess of love. Now, this is Greek love, right? So there's 4 kinds. You've got unconditional love, you've got motherly love, brotherly love, and then erotica, right? Sexual love. And it was the sexual love that Aphrodite was famous for. You see, she was not only worshipped, and not only was she worshipped, it was also the whole concept of sexual immorality that was worshipped. So we have an area here, a island, a place which is seeped not only in religion but also in sexual immorality and the worship of sexual immorality and this goddess Aphrodite. And a whole cult was based around here. So what you have is you have Paul coming here with Barnabas and with Mark, and they are presenting the truth. They're going from synagogue to synagogue, and they're presenting the truth. And people accept it, even to the point of the highest guy in charge who believed and accepted it. When he heard the truth, when he saw the evidence, that was it, acception. Now, compare that with what happened when Paul went to Mars Hill, right? He went there. Now, this is the height of Greek philosophical thinking, right? The height of Greek philosophical culture. And he went there, and there was the tomb of the altar of the unknown God. He stood up, he started with Genesis, and he went from Genesis to Jesus. A very good way of doing it, by the way. And he took them through the reason why they needed a saviour. And what was the response? Many mocked, we're told. Some said, hey, we'll hear you out on this again, and a few believed. A rather different reaction to what was happening when Paul came here to Cyprus. So why would a pagan, extremely pagan, sexually immoral, idol-worshipping culture like they had here in Cyprus accept better than they did in Mars Hill? Well, I suspect it has something to do with what was going on with the Greek world at the time, particularly in the centre of Greek philosophical culture. They were actually moving away from paganism in the truest sense of paganism, but retaining key pagan ideas and moving towards naturalism. Even though they were contextually pagan, right, they were still a polytheistic people by nature, they had started to move away from the idea of many gods and into the idea of naturalism, into the idea that we are gods, into the idea that given enough time, life can arise from non-life. Given enough time, there really isn't any need for a god because you replace that god with time. In other words, the Greeks believed in evolution, and it was a very racist version of evolution because they believed that they'd evolved from the slime, and they believed that they'd evolved out a better quality slime than the Jews had. Yeah, nothing new under the sun, right? But here you have a predominantly pagan but naturalistically pagan culture at Mars Hill, and most mocked. Few said, oh, well, interesting, we'll hear you again, and even fewer actually believed. But yet in a world which is full of religion, here in Cyprus, in a world that was so vastly removed from the idea of godliness, that was so seeped in idol worship and sexual immorality, when they heard the truth and when they saw evidence of it, right? Paul snapping his fingers and the guy going blind, right? The one who was trying to get them shut down. People believed. Interesting historical context. Now, I wonder which culture we're most like today. Oh yeah, it's the naturalistic pagan thinking of the Greeks of Mars Hill. Not necessarily the same as what you had here in Cyprus. That's why we need to take Paul's tactic of starting from Genesis and going outwards. You've got to start with that good foundation, and it's been really, really spectacular to be able to come here to Cyprus and actually get a bit of that context, actually be where Paul came, be where Paul visited. And I mean, it's middle of November, the sun is starting to set, it's only about 3:30, and it's still sort of, you know, mid-20s. It's been really, really warm today, so it's really nice to get out and have a bit of an explore as well. I mean, just have a look at what we've got around us. Absolutely stunning and beautiful. And these are all tombs around here, these are all places. Archaeology is just absolutely abundant. Everywhere you look, there's bits of pottery and stuff kind of strewn around. So thanks for watching, and we'll probably try and do one or two other little things, but this is really a holiday for me and Sarah Ann, so don't expect too much. But we've got some big plans coming up later, which I'm sure we'll discuss on Creation Conversations at some point, so check us out there. Until next time, we'll catch you later.